Another busy night of all things people, power, and politics on Detroit's only nightly political talk show. This, my friends, is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. We have a loaded show for you and no time to waste. So toss that phone aside and get out of that, is this true or not, echo chamber. And let's talk for the next 30 minutes about what is true. With all the changes the Trump administration is making, there's a lot of anxiety in the air. One Republican says, hey, that fear isn't necessarily justified each and every time. We're talking with her, as well as a prominent Democrat who says, simply put, it may be. Plus, we are diving into the immigration issue with two conservatives with two very different points of view. One says the Trump approach is working. The other says he doesn't have a right. You decide in about 20 minutes. And the immigration issue is where we begin tonight. Remember this scene from a couple of weeks ago where migrants were sent to El Salvador under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act? Well, despite a judge ordering the Trump administration to turn the planes around and bring them back, well, the same judge says he has probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt because of this. The Trump administration claims they did nothing wrong because it wasn't in his written order. So here's what can happen, and stay with me here. The judge says the Trump administration can purge the contempt finding if they obey his order and bring back the migrants sent to El Salvador in violation of that order. Now, that way they can challenge their deportation. Otherwise, the case would be referred for prosecution, which would then be sent to the Justice Department, which you know falls under the Trump administration. If the DOJ doesn't prosecute it, the judge says he'll appoint another prosecutor. Now, here's some of what the judge wrote in his ruling. The Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of judicial orders, especially by officials of a coordinate branch who have sworn an oath to uphold it, says Judge James Boasberg, U.S. District Court. As you can imagine, reaction is split down ideological lines. Here's what some of you are telling us here on Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere. Dennis says, good luck with that district judge. What a joke. Molly says, okay, so what? They don't seem to care what any judge has to say. And Shyla says, what does any of this really mean? If it's more talk, no action, please save taxpayers time and money. We are tired of the tug of war. This comes as the Trump administration is already under fire for not bringing back this guy, wrongfully deported to El Salvador despite the Supreme Court ordering them to do so. We're talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He had a work permit and was given protection from deportation back in 2019. Now, the Trump administration admits it was an administrative error to deport him, but has repeatedly claimed he's a member of the MS-13 gang, even though his attorneys say they haven't shown any evidence that that's true. Attorney General Pam Bondi with this to say today.
ICE testified, an immigration judge ruled he was a member of MS-13. An appellate judge ruled he was a member of MS-13. Hard stop. He should not be in our country. He was deported. They needed one additional step in paperwork, but now MS-13 is characterized as they should be, as an FTO, as a foreign terrorist organization. So he is not coming back to our country.
But the evidence, we're not going to see the evidence.
We have the transcripts from the court hearings. I'll be glad to give you the court hearings from 2019, what we have, sure.
Now, again, the Supreme Court said the Trump administration must facilitate bringing Abrego Garcia back to this country. And a federal judge said she'll order sworn testimony by the Trump administration to see if they followed her order to bring him back. Obviously, more to come. No shortage of political news at all. Let's run through some of the other big stories we're following tonight. We'll begin here. The Pentagon puts a senior advisor to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on leave and escorts him out of the building. We're talking about Dan Caldwell. It's tied to an investigation into leaks. The Pentagon didn't say what leaks are being investigated, but Caldwell was Hegseth's point person in that signal scandal where military strike plans were sent out in that group chat that mistakenly included a reporter from The Atlantic. The Pentagon has been cracking down on leaks since before that incident. Take you to the IRS now, where the Trump administration plans to eliminate the department's direct file program. It allows people to file tax returns directly for free. It was developed by the Biden administration, and users say it made tax filing easy, fast, and affordable. But many Republicans and tax preparers complain it's a waste of tax dollars because free filing programs already exist, even though many say they are hard to use. And this story directly impacts Michigan. You see, the Army Corps of Engineers is fast-tracking permits for the new Line 5 tunnel project under the Straits of Mackinac. That's the oil pipeline owned by Enbridge. You've heard about this story for so many years now. Enbridge says it's safe, but environmentalists really are worried about the possibility of a spill into these waters. That tunnel would be built around the line. Regulators say no steps will be skipped in the fast tracking, but wouldn't say how quickly it'll move forward. All right, we've talked a lot about the immigration issue, but there was a special ceremony today welcoming people to the United States. Take a look. This was a naturalization ceremony at Wayne County Community College where more than 24 citizens were sworn in. For many, it's the end of a journey that's taken years to complete.
Immigration story is the story of the United States. With the exception of our Native American brothers and sisters who came a longer time ago, the rest of us all have a story of our ancestors who came to this country within the last 400 years.
Politics divide us, but values don't divide us. That's why we're here to renew our Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. Constitution, to our great nation, and to the core principles of freedom, liberties that we all ought to protect.
I had the honor of emceeing this event. I took the selfie after everyone was sworn in. They were so excited, people from all over the world right here in Michigan. And I just want to say, it reminded me of the fact that I wouldn't be here had it not been for a ceremony like this. You see, my parents came here in 1973 with really not a lot of money, but a big dream. And they had a lot of brain power, and they wanted to be a part of America's future. And my dad helped build cars. In fact, my dad worked at General Motors, General Tires, General Electric, and General Foods. And he always says he's a four-star general. But I got to tell you, we're so proud in this country to be who we are, where we are. And everyone here deserves a seat at not only that table, but everywhere else. It's been a whirlwind first 3 months in office for the Trump administration. Executive orders here, government restructuring there, and a lot of anxiety for many Americans. We're talking with two people on if these fears are founded. This is The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, diving into all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about the whirlwind first 3 months of the Trump administration, Macomb Public Works Commissioner and former Republican Congresswoman Candace Miller and current Democratic State Representative Abraham Ayash. It's good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you so much.
For having us.
Let's begin on something that we both all can agree on, that the governor went to the White House with Matt Hall, the speaker, and they forged a bipartisan friendship on that day. I think Governor Whitmer said 70% of the time they get along pretty well.
Yeah.
And they kind of made a deal with President Trump. This means a lot. We'll begin with you, Candace, because this is Macomb County. To build again and to fly again out of Selfridge, how important is that to the community?
It is critically important. And Selfridge has got a long, storied history in Macomb County as a critical component of our national defense, certainly. And they continue to fly there. They have A-10s right now. Yeah. They have a squadron of A-10s. And what we're going to get shortly, and we do have some refuelers now, but we're going to be getting KC-46As. We thought we were going to get 8. We're going to end up with 12, which is a fantastic thing. But what we are really looking for is a follow-on fighter mission, because the A-10s are legacy aircraft. They're very antiquated. They're going to be retiring them. And so, really, our entire congressional delegation, both Republicans and Democrats, have been so focused on trying to get a follow-on fighter mission. And for the last couple administrations, we have not gotten anywhere. But with this administration, President Trump is saying that something good is going to happen at Selfridge, whether it's F-16s, F-35s, what have you. If we were able to get one of those squadrons at Selfridge, it would be transformational for the entire region. The jobs, the maintainers, all of these kinds of things, the R&D spinoff through the industrial corridor, the defense corridor that would happen there. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and any implication that they're not already, of course, flying out of Selfridge was my error, but absolutely to have these missions added to that would just be so wonderful to make it even more robust. And so, Representative Ayash, that's an interesting point that Candace Miller makes here today, saying, you know, they tried under Biden. I know Matt Hall talked about that. We went, we asked, and nothing ever happened. Do you give credit to President Trump for basically unilaterally saying, yeah, let's do this?
Well, I think President Biden was in the process of doing it. I always say government moves like honey, but it's not as sweet. So it's a very slow process. I will tell you that in Lansing, colleagues like Senator Kevin Hertel and Denise Menser were pushing the governor to continue to advocate with the Biden administration and subsequently the Trump administration. You see Big Gretch heading to the Oval Office to make the case for the state of Michigan. And it's a net win, right? If Trump wants to take all the credit, I don't care. As long as the people of Michigan will have a transformative project like Selfridge expanding, I think we're going to see a huge, huge opportunity.
And Representative Ayash, as we always do on the show, we're going to be objective about everything. I mean, we have been covering for years this mission to get the mission at Selfridge, and it has just fallen, it seems, at some level on deaf ears with prior administrations. And now they finally have some movement here. So you would say working together, Whitmer, Hall, Trump, is a good thing, right?
And Denise and Kevin Hertel.
And all of you. Yeah, I mean, all of the. But let's talk about this feeling that we have in this country right now. And let's be honest about what we're really feeling. Democrats are in one corner, it seems, talking about a threat to democracy. And on the other end, we have Republicans saying it's a lot of hype. Candace, I want to begin with you about this very important question about President Trump essentially defying, at this point, the Supreme Court's order in this El Salvador case. Objectively speaking, what do you think about it?
I mean, honestly, let me just say, I cannot believe that this is the hill that Democrats want to fight on. This guy is clearly an MS-13 gang member. They have confidential information about that, although this district judge threw it out. Is that what we're talking about?
No evidence, though, yet from prosecutors at all on that, right?
The man was here illegally, and his home is El Salvador. And he also, I think his wife, who I'm watching his wife, this woman had 2 personal protection orders against this guy because he beat her up. So he's not really the citizen of the year. But if that's the guy you want to be a martyr for, I mean, I'm mind-boggled by the whole thing.
For a moment, if we take away his character and the allegations against him, and even if he is,
can you?
But if you do for a moment and talk about just by virtue of the institution of the Supreme Court being honored, do you think presidents should be able to do this and exercise that kind of power? Do you think maybe it's because he believes there's a real threat here?
I think the president does think there's a real threat here, so we'll have to see how it all unfolds. I will say this. The biggest issue really in the campaign, certainly one of them, I think we would all agree, was border security.
Yeah, oh yeah.
President Biden let 11 million illegals into our nation. That's bigger than the population of Michigan. More than the population of Michigan came here illegally, and we couldn't shut the border down unless whatever was supposed to happen. President Trump, honestly, I know the media is hardly even talking about this anymore because it's like they have to go across the border and find someone to arrest now because he has shut down the border. He's secured the border. That was a big issue.
Our second segment is actually all about the border as well, because we are talking about the highlights of that. I mean, no one can objectively say that the Biden administration did a great job with the border. In fact, it was on many people's accord that he lost the election, and so did Kamala, partially because of the issues. So, Abraham Ayash, Representative Ayash, your thoughts on how this administration thus far has moved forward? I know there's a lot of concern that you have as well, but in terms of the border, what grade would you give them?
Well, again, I think when you look at the way they are moving, it is just at the whims of whatever the president feels and whatever he thinks makes sense for him. It is not about one man. You know, we do not believe it's about one man. You know, you mentioned this gentleman, but for us, we see the exact opposite, the exact same thing happening with folks making everything about whatever Donald Trump wants. And somewhere I read of a constitution that set up a system of checks and balances. And, you know, Candace, you mentioned that if this is the hill that we want to die on, the shining city on the hill is what we want to die on. It's a democracy that has to be respected. The rule of law must be respected. To disregard a Supreme Court ruling just because you disagree with it, if that's how we could have done things, I wish we did that with Citizens United. But there are systems and checks and balances in place for a reason. And to disregard it simply because it doesn't fit the president's political narrative.
I think you got to let it play out here. I would say that.
But he literally is refusing the order of the Supreme Court.
I don't know that that's true. But we'll let it play out.
He certainly is being stubborn about it, and he's putting his foot down. We're going to watch this really carefully. In fact, tomorrow we're doing a program, a day after tomorrow rather, on what happens when a president says, hey, you know what, I don't agree with this. Here's how I want to do things. We're going to watch it really carefully. Listen, it's never enough time. But I want to say thank you to both of you for joining us. We can can agree that suffrage is a
So
definitely a
important.
wonderful thing,
Absolutely.
and we're excited about the future for suffrage, and we can all get on
Absolutely.
board with that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that ceremony today that Abraham Ayash, you were at as well.
Yeah,
the
I say, look,
naturalization ceremony.
immigration is a beautiful part of this country.
It is.
If the president cares about border security, then we would fix the immigration system that every single president for decades has left on the table.
I should mention that Candace, when she was watching that, said it was so moving, and you reflected on your heritage, that your
First generation
came from Scotland.
Yes,
That's right.
We're all, I mean, this is a nation of immigrants.
Amen.
All come from
Yes.
somewhere. Well, Representative Ayash and Candace Miller, we thank you both for your
Thank
time
you.
here on The Pulse.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, think all conservatives are in line with President Trump's immigration policies? Think again. We're hearing from one man who's known as the urban conservative who says the president doesn't have it all right, plus someone who supports the efforts. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. And here to talk about President Trump's immigration policy, conservative commentator Jamie Rowe and the urban conservative Kerry Jackson, both with very different takes on the president. And we thank you both for being here on The Pulse today. Hey, listen, it's interesting because usually we have a Democrat and a Republican on. We have two Republicans on, by name. But when it comes to this president, it has divided many people, and some Republicans are saying, not my cup of tea. I want to begin by framing that way and talking about the border, where we left off in the last conversation with Abraham and Candace. Jamie Rowe, Candace Miller, a Republican, said that's one of the success stories that's not being talked about. Do you agree with that?
100%. They want to talk about, media wants to talk about a lot of the controversy surrounding, like the guy from El Salvador who was deported, and instead of talking about the fact that 95% reduction in illegal border crossings in the last 7 weeks, after we were told it wasn't possible unless a bill was passed, President Trump has done it through following the existing law and letting our border agents do their jobs. Exactly what I voted for, and I'm 100% supportive of the actions President Trump has taken to secure our border.
Kerry, what do you think? How would you grade President Trump and his administration on the border issue?
Here's the thing. Jamie is very, very good at what he does, and the party is very good at listening to him, because they will manufacture a crisis, and then tell you, we are the ones that came along and saved you from the crisis that they manufactured in the first place.
You think the border crisis was manufactured?
I absolutely. We still have the exact same border. There's not been any wall built from Texas all the way over to California. I think that there was a lot of alien smuggling going on. As somebody that previously represented a bunch of criminals and alien smugglers and drug dealers do something for financial reasons. I think that right now there's they're not being incentivized to do what they were doing before. None of those people, what Candace just earlier said was 11 million. Those people didn't just get up one morning and say, we're all going to take this long walk. There was a reason, and everybody knows that there was organized gangs bringing them up here. Those organized gangs are not bringing them up to the border anymore, and they didn't just stop because Donald Trump, while he was down at Mar-a-Lago, stood at the border and said, I'm Donald Trump, you can't come here anymore. They're not coming for a reason. So it's good that you want to take credit for it, but at least
Kerry, let's just say this. Kamala Harris, her feet were held to the fire during the election. She was asked several times, what would you do differently than Joe Biden? In later iterations of interviews that were done post-campaign.
What would you do different than the man that's your boss and the one that made you run for president?
But you know what?
And you wanted her to kick him in the...
You don't kick, but perhaps you would say, here's what we're going to do differently, when you know he's no longer going to be your boss in a few months. But my question to you is this. This was a crisis that Democrats even agreed is a crisis. We've had...
The Democrats and the Republicans both had a compromise. They both had worked it out. And Trump went to him and said, no way. We've too invested in this. This is the idea that we're running on. You can't solve this problem now. And they all backed out.
Tell that to a mom or a dad who's lost their child to fentanyl that's come from over the border. They want to see border control. And this president...
We all want to see it. You're not going to find anybody in this country, Democrat, Republican, or Green Party or anything, that's going to tell you we want more drugs in our country. But the truth of the matter is, let's be honest with the people, and so that they'll understand. Donald Trump is not the great savior that he builds himself as.
Here's some honesty. March of 2024, Joe Biden was president. 147,000 illegal border crossings just in March of 2024 at the southern border. March of 2025, Donald Trump, 6 weeks into office, 7,000 illegal border crossings at the southern border. And the reason why the Mexican
the gangs,
cartels and gangs, human traffickers got shut down is because they're getting stopped. Because we let Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, and everybody else do their job. Listen to them. Listen to what they say.
We only have a few minutes. I do want to ask you, though, about this latest, the president essentially right now putting his foot down against the Supreme Court ruling. Do you think that that sets a good precedence for us moving forward?
I believe the administration believes that they have followed that order because it said facilitate the return of an El Salvadorian citizen from El Salvador, requires El Salvador to go along with it. This guy's an MS-13 gang member who has been put in
Don't we need evidence?
Who was under a he was under a deportation order that was adjudicated through 2 immigration courts, all of which said the guy was an MS-13 member. And he, since that time, since he was allowed to stay because he was under a threat from a rival gang,
but in 2019
that no longer exists.
He was protected. He was asked to stay. He was okay to stay here under a work permit. After all of those allegations, why would that be the case in 2019, where he was able to stay with a work permit? He was still
because they said that he was under threat from a rival gang within El Salvador that no longer exists.
Kerry
said in front of the judges already made the ruling. The judges already said they won't produce any evidence, and you've got an attorney general who says, I don't really care what the court said. He's never coming back anytime. Donald Trump told us who he was years ago. He said, I can kill someone on Fifth Avenue and nobody's going to hold me to it. This man is killing people every single day, and nobody's doing anything about it.
He's stopping people from being killed. Yesterday, they buried or convicted the murderer of Rachel Morin in the state of Maryland, where this Maryland man was from. And I've seen zero reporting on the fact that this illegal alien criminal is going to jail for the rest of his life.
There is no one, and Democrat or Republican, that I know that says it's a great idea to have people who are here illegally who have been proven to commit crimes. I think the issue at hand here is whether or not there's evidence, whether a prosecutor has produced evidence that that's the case. We'll have to watch this one, and we will carefully. I only have a minute or two left here. Let's talk about tariffs for a moment. It affects us here at home. Sean Fain says, I think Trump's right about this. Kerry, do you agree?
And the fact that he runs one of the largest unions, and he said it, there are times that, again, I said this the last time I was here, there are plenty of times that both Democrat and Republicans have had to use tariffs, and except the truth of the matter is they used them strategically, not to wreck the economy.
Jamie, 15 seconds left. Your thoughts?
Sean Fain is right, and the fact of the matter is we've seen what the current situation has done over the last 30 years to Michigan and American manufacturing. President Trump is disrupting that, and he's going to bring change. He's going to bring manufacturing back to America.
There's a reason we do this show every single night, because the effects of the policies that we're seeing in effect, we would like to watch to see what happens, and we want to report it honestly as we do here every night. I thank you both for joining us here. Kerry and Jamie, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ruth.
That is The Pulse for tonight. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ruth Barrage. As always, we'll see you back here tomorrow night. Have a good one. Yeah, this is
Yo.